she was horrified at our family for watching this movie, and we're all laughing.
Yeah, we're laughing.
And she's horrified. I can't overstate how horrified she was. She's like, what kind of monstrous family did I marry into?
Yeah, we were laughing the whole time all these murders are happening.
You are listening to the Silver Screen Happy Hour. I'm Chris Wiegand, along with my brother Jerome.
I'm still here, but feeling better.
Yes, we are probably an hour into a two-part episode, Raising Fargo. So that means we're already at least a beer in. So
I am a glass of larceny in, and the strong larceny.
So you shared on the last episode that you're drinking larceny as a tribute to the outlaws in the movies we're talking about.
126 proof larceny.
So hopefully you can hold it together with all that high octane, because you're doing the heavy lifting here. I'm just here for the ride.
I'm going to transition now into my lightsabers because I don't want to keep drinking that. I do have a family I do have to talk to later.
Yeah.
So I am going to transition now into my lightsabers. If you will listen to this.
Yep, and I'm still on my light beers as a tribute to the light beers that were being drank in the movies. It's my Mick Ultra.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All
right. So we just tackled Raising Arizona, doing a Coen Brothers double feature here.
We are. So what's the next film?
Fargo.
Oh, beautiful. Fucking beautiful. I love it. I got to tell you, before we start, this is one of my favorite films in the 90s.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it.
Well, can I start with my
Well, wait, we're not there yet.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
I can't wait.
We'll get to that part. So let me give the audience first the specs.
Yeah.
I always start with the specs of each movie.
Sure.
1996, directed by Joel Coen, written by Joel and Ethan Coen. Running time 1 hour 38 minutes, another short one. It had a budget of $7 million. It was released on April 5th, 1996, and it made $24 million at the box office. Are you seeing the similarities with Raising Arizona?
Yeah.
Raising Arizona had a $6 million budget and made $22 million. This one had a $7 million budget and made $24 million.
Did you say it was released in April of 96?
Yeah, both released in April. The other one was released in April of 87. This one, I remember the first one landed at, what did I say, like the 52nd spot for domestic. This one was good for 75th place on the domestic list. It got beat out by only 164,000 by the 74th placeholder, Scream.
Oh, wow.
Which is weird because I remember Scream being a much bigger hit than that. So I'm not sure how a Box Office Mojo got their numbers, or if they only included certain months or whatever, but I don't know.
Yeah.
This one, however, in contrast to Raising Arizona, Fargo garnered 7 Oscar nominations and won 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Best Actress, Frances McDormand, and Best Original Screenplay for the Coens.
Yeah, that was their first, wasn't it?
That was their first, yes. Side note, the top 10 films of that year. We talked about the top 10 films the year that Raising Arizona came out. Here's the top 10 films of 1996. Independence Day was number 1 at $817 million worldwide.
Love that movie.
Followed by Twister, Mission Impossible, that's Mission Impossible 1, The Rock, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 101 Dalmatians, Ransom, The Nutty Professor, Jerry Maguire, and Space Jam. So already we're seeing that switch. Remember when I told you when we did the Raising Arizona episode, we named the top 10 films that year. Only 2 of them were action films. The rest were like these Oscar-type movies. Already, which is, what is this, 87 and 96, not even 10 years later, these are all action films.
Yeah.
With the exception of Ransom, which actually has a lot of action in it. I'd say the only straight drama on this list is Jerry Maguire, and that was up for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? See how the pendulum swung within just 10 years? Where action films were back in the 80s, and particularly the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, if you go back that far, the top grossing films are all the Oscar films, right? Mm-hmm. It's all the really good movies. Somewhere along the line, it switched to where your popcorn film was the one that made all the money, but the Oscars went to the lower films, the smaller films.
Right.
Fargo was one of them. and it stars Frances McDormand as Marge Gunderson, William H. Macy as Jerry Lundegaard. Every time I say his name, I have to say it, Jerry Lundegaard. The way he says it. Steve Buscemi as Carl Showalter, Peter Stormare as Ger Grimsrud, and Harv Presnell as Wade Gustafson. All right, tell me, what is your history with this movie?
So the thing I remember most was Thanksgiving weekend, 1996.
Yes.
Because we were
That's oddly enough mine too.
We were at our aunt's house. Now, I thought I had seen it already because I knew what we were about to see.
I did see it already. In fact, I think I was the one that brought it.
Yeah,
because I do have an additional story with mine, but go ahead and tell yours.
So this was November of 96. I was married October 12th, 96. And so, Jesse, my wife, comes to Thanksgiving with my family, and we sit down as a family to watch a family movie.
Was this Jesse's first Thanksgiving at Aunt Denise's?
Well, I think she came the year before when we were dating, but that's not as memorable because this.
So we first we have to set up the scene, right? This is a total cabin in the woods horror story that we do every year. We would leave the Detroit area and go to Kalamazoo, which for anyone who doesn't know is about good 2.5, 3 hours drive from Detroit. Yeah. And my Aunt Denise's house in the middle of, was it Schoolcraft? Was the
Portage.
town? Portage. And we would be there all weekend, we would start it at Tuesday, right? Yeah. And we would go and we would smoke cigars and we would play Risk.
Yeah, once we got older, I mean, we were going there for years, so it started when we were little kids.
When we were little kids, we would just build forts and shit and play video games.
Outside
but as we got older, 96, I was 21 years old by that point. We were drinking and we were smoking cigars and we would play Risk, the game of world domination. And poor Jesse got introduced in this cabin in the woods sort of mentality where we all become savages for the weekend. And she got introduced to this.
Well, it's how I knew she was a keeper. She survived that weekend, but she was horrified at our family for watching this movie. And we're all laughing. And she's horrified. I can't overstate how horrified she was. She's like, what kind of monstrous family did I marry into?
Yeah, we were laughing the whole time while these murders are happening. In fact, I think we laughed harder with every murder that happened. Yeah. Yeah, it's sadistic. Now, my story is the same as yours. All of that is the same for me. Mm-hmm. I loved it. I loved going to Kalamazoo for Thanksgiving weekend and the cigars and the Risk and always watching a movie. And Fargo was that movie that introduced poor Jesse to our family. But I had a little precursor to that. It had just hit video earlier, and I was still in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I was going to school at Columbia College, Chicago. And me and my roommates at the time, Hughes, my buddy Hughes, who I often talk about, he was one of my roommates. We rented it when it hit video, and we couldn't stop laughing. It was such, even the little things, like the guy that he's trying to swindle during the car deal with the True Coat. The guy's like, "You lied to me, Mr. Lundegaard. You're a bold-faced liar." And he goes, "You're a fucking liar." Even seeing a guy struggle to get the word fucking out because he obviously doesn't swear often. Yeah. Even little things like that were hilarious. Yeah. And we would it was one of those things where we would rewind it and watch it again.
Oh, it was gold.
It was so great. So then when it was come time to go home to Thanksgiving, now again, I was in Chicago at the time. So for me, it was I used to take the train from Chicago's Union Station to the Kalamazoo station. I took the train, and Mom and Dad would pick me up from the train station, or Aunt Denise would, because I would usually go early. I'd go on Monday night or Tuesday to get Thanksgiving weekend started on Tuesday. That's how sick and demented I was, and I brought it home with me. And that's where your story picks up. So I had a little bit of a precursor. I was the catalyst, so to speak. I was the problem. I brought the crashing into the old world. I brought the movie that terrified Jesse. Yeah. So it's great. That's great. All right, log me.
All right. Minnesota car salesman Jerry Lundegaard's inept crime falls apart due to his and his henchmen's bungling and the persistent police work of the quite pregnant Marge Gunderson. That was written roughly.
I like how they say quite pregnant.
Yeah. Quite pregnant.
By the way, there are a few elements that I didn't actually write down as part of my notes, but they do have to be said. What a great choice to make the hero of the story a 7-month pregnant woman.
Yeah.
Right? Like, God, when you think about crime dramas or crime films, the hard-nosed cop, it's always like a cop on the edge, right? Like an alcoholic cop on the edge, and he's just one step from being a criminal himself. But they make it a 7-month pregnant Marge Gunderson. But we are going to get to, and I am going to blow your doors off, that Marge is not so as innocent as we think she is. All right, side notes on the beats. Of course, I have to do side notes on this one because the Coens always throw me for a loop. You can't just do a simple Blake Snyder beat sheet with the Coen Brothers. All right, so let's just start with, who the fuck's story is it? Based on the log line, we're assuming it's Jerry's story. Right?
Yeah.
Based on how the entire first act is all on Jerry, and Marge doesn't even show up until act 2.
Yeah, Jerry's the one with the problem.
Right, so proper storytelling and script structure would insist that Jerry is the protagonist, albeit a flawed one, but he's still the lead. However, once Marge is introduced, it's pretty clear at that point that she's the main character, and Jerry sort of drifts away into the background until the climax of the film. Actually, I'm sorry, through the climax of the film, only to reemerge kind of at the ending, right? Having never learned a lesson, he doesn't learn anything. We're going to break down the beats for both Jerry and Marge. That's my surprise for you. That's my gift for you today, sir.
Sweet.
And all of you listeners. We're going to break down the beats for both Jerry and Marge and see how they intersect each other. Perfect example of know the rules before you break them. Nobody does it fucking better than the Coens, right? I mean, they follow the rules. They follow the tools. They follow the beats. They just do it in an unconventional and unique way. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to really dig in. But before we do that, I have to discuss first the flat arc character. Okay, for you beginning writers, a flat arc character is where the lead doesn't really learn a lesson on the journey. We do as an audience, and maybe the world around them changes, or at least the world is somehow viewed differently by them, but they themselves generally stay the same. The best example of this has always been Superman, right? Superman's always the same in every movie, every comic, every TV show, whatever it is. He's righteous, he's good, he never lies, he doesn't change. The stories around him that create all these characters and the world and evil and bad guys, his view of the world might change, but he himself doesn't. He has the same concepts at the beginning that he has at the end. Right? He'll go on adventures to save humanity from evil. By and large, he doesn't change. On a darker scale, and I know I've talked about this on previous podcasts as well, Paul Schrader characters often have the flat arc, but not so much in a righteous or good way. Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull, Ali Fox in The Mosquito Coast, particularly Wade Whitehouse in Affliction. These are all Paul Schrader scripts. They certainly change the people around them, for sure. Just knowing these guys is the journey, and everybody around them learns their goals, but they themselves stay the same. They never really learn the lesson. All 4 of those characters I just mentioned have the same belief system at the end of the film as they had at the beginning. The audience and the supporting characters, on the other hand, are the ones who actually learn, about them. They actually learn something. And the reason I mention this is because investigation stories, the cops and robbers, the cop trying to investigate the criminal thing, what Blake Snyder calls the why done it in his story patterns, those very often have a flat arc protagonist because their tactics of investigation, their belief system, that never changes. The interesting thing about Fargo is that Marge, if we treat her that she is the lead, even though she's introduced late, she is the investigating officer. She seems to have a flat arc as far as her investigating. She's the same cop at the end as she is at the beginning. But ultimately, she does learn a very valuable lesson that we set up with the theme. And oddly enough, it will bring immeasurable worth to a scene later in the film that everyone I've ever talked to always says that this one scene, quote unquote, has nothing to do with the movie. You know what scene I'm talking about, right? The scene with Mike and Nikita where she goes to have a drink at the hotel bar with the Asian guy.
Talk about that.
We will get to that.
Well,
everybody always says that has nothing to do with the movie, but it does, because well, I'll explain it when we get there.
All right.
Jerry, in his list of beats, certainly has a flat arc because he doesn't learn a goddamn thing. He has the same mentality of choices at the end that he has at the beginning.
Right.
The ending is him getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you wanted to extend this film, say another half hour, since it's only an hour and a half movie, if you were to make this 2-hour film and it ends with Jerry's sort of like incarceration and trial, yeah, maybe he breaks down on the stand and realizes, oh, I should never have done this. I love my wife. I was too blinded by money, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You could come up with a spiritual goal for Jerry. But in the film that we are presented, he has a flat arc.
Yeah.
Jerry doesn't learn a fucking thing. Right? All right. Now that I got all that off my chest and out of the way, we have the double beats. Opening image. This is just Jerry's right now. Car drives in the daylight but kicks up snow and shows a mist of uncertainty. Theme stated. Intro to Jerry Lundegaard in his first meeting with Carl Showalter and Greer Grimsrud, who he's hired to kidnap his wife. Mm-hmm. The theme is brief and barely noticeable with a single line of dialogue, but the concept of appreciating what you have is at play here. Mm. If any dialogue supports this, it's mostly 6 minutes in, when upon hearing about the plan that they've been hired for, even the bad guys are trying to talk Jerry out of it.
Right.
Like, after Jerry admits that he's doing this for money, Carl says, and he says his father-in-law is very well off, Carl says, quote, why don't you just ask him for the money? And Grimsrud cuts in, or your fucking wife. And he's like, yeah, or your fucking wife, Jerry. Like, even they are trying to talk him out of it. Like, you don't need to do this. If you need money and your fucking father-in-law is rich, just ask him for the money.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, they are even saying, but Jerry doesn't appreciate what he has.
Yeah.
He is more greedy than anything. Ironically, Marge is not in this scene, but her theme is the same, and I'll get to that after. All right, setup. In this section, we learn more about Jerry, but the interesting thing is that what the Coens do here, they understand, yet they break yet another fundamental rule, particularly in cop case movies. We don't really know what Jerry needs the money for. Like, in most movies, there's a motivation for the criminal,
right? And
we know what they're after. But this one's never really explained. Like, it's clear that he's defrauding the GMAC, right? He's defrauding them by taking insurance money. He's taking insurance loan money for cars that don't exist. But why?
Yeah.
Like the kidnapping plan? Is that to pay back the GMAC because they realized his plan? He got found out. He got caught.
Right.
So is the kidnapping plan to pay them back? Or does he want the GMAC money on top of the kidnapping money? And let's not forget about the deal he comes up with to tell his father-in-law about the parking lot that he wants to invest in. So, like, what? Because when he thinks that's in play, he wants to call off the kidnapping. So really, what money is he after and why? Why does he need the money?
Right.
It's never explained. Right?
It's wild, yeah.
It is wild because every other movie, that's a major part that will sink a film. If you don't have a clear motivation of the bad guy, we don't buy into it.
Right.
But the Coens sort of like, you'll buy into it.
Well, you almost buy into it because he's such a doof.
Right. He's such a fucking doofus. So, I don't know. But what is clear is that Jerry's obviously greedy for the money, right?
Yeah.
It's just not clear what he needs it for. And in a Coen Brothers kind of way, it doesn't even matter, right? The story works without it. They take that structure It's like, yes, we understand script structure, we understand the rules, and here's where we break it over our knee. You know, like, they just don't care. Oddly enough, though, in a Blake Snyder save the cat kind of way, we are drawn to actually root for Jerry at the beginning, because when he gets home, he gets pushed around by his father-in-law, Wade Gustafson, in his own house, right? Old man Wade, the rich owner of the dealership of which Jerry is executive sales manager. By the way, whenever I hear that, I have to say it the way Jerry says it. I'm executive sales manager, you know? Anyway, so whenever I've had people come into my store and say, yes, I am the district sales manager of whatever they're trying to push on me. Yeah. And I always hear Jerry Lundegaard in my head. I would know. I'm executive sales manager. Anyway.
Yeah, I got to ask. So at some point, you quit going by Jerry and started using your birth name, Jerome. Was it this movie?
No, it wasn't. That's a funny story in and of itself. I'll tell you real quick. I was Jerry up until I started working for Target. So at Target, everybody that's an ETL, executive team leader, has a radio, right? It has like a headset and a radio. And there was another guy there named Terry at the first store I worked at. And every time they called for Terry, I fucking answered. And they're like, no, not you, the other one, the other guy or whatever. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. From here on out, call me Jerome. So I changed my name to Jerome roughly around 2005. Okay. Now, I don't want to say change my name. My name's always been Jerome. I just never went by Jerome. I always went by Jerry. In 2005, I switched. So I was still Jerry long after Fargo.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, I think our cousin Tom used to call me Jerry Lundegaard because I was Jerry. Just to be a dick in a fun way.
Since we're on the topic of your name, can we continue off this rabbit trail for a minute? Can you tell the story about the three guys that came to set up a display at your store and none of them believed your name was Jerome?
Well, that's not one story.
Well, you told it as one story to me once, or you put it on Facebook, I think. It was great.
Is this where they thought I was the black guy, right?
There was three African Americans, and they what were their names?
Yeah, so I don't remember their name. I don't remember their names anymore. I'd have to go back.
But, I actually have it.
I think
I know how to look it up on Facebook because I've told this story to so many people, and they all laugh. So let me look it up. I'll cut this dead air out. Here it is for the audience. I'll just read your Facebook post from 2011.
Okay.
Jerome Michael Wiegand posted, they said three vendors would come into my store for re-merchandising. Rodriguez, Sanchez, and Lopez. The three guys showed up and they were all African American. They refused to believe my name was Jerome.
That is so old. I've forgotten about that story.
It's so funny because I used to be on this team at my work. And I worked with two Jeromes, and they were both black. And I told them both that story. I read it to them. They both died.
And the funny thing about that is that, that has become almost an amalgam over my life in California, where I've had 100 of those stories since then. What year did you say that was? 2011?
Yeah.
Since then, I cannot tell you how many people have heard that you're going to meet a Jerome. He's from Detroit. And I am the last person they expect to see walking through that door. I seriously walk in, I'm like, yeah, I'm Jerome. And they're like, no, really, where's the guy at? Like, no, I'm the guy. Like, are you sure? Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like,
that's great.
Like, they're always expecting, like, some big, muscular black dude. Like, yeah, I'm a Lions fan.
Well, I can see why you disappoint them.
Well, I'm very disappointing. And I'm a fat, short white guy.
From Detroit.
Right, from Detroit. I'm like the least
from center, from the east side of Macomb County.
Detroit suburbs, whatever. I'm still a Lions fan though. But people see, that's the funny thing. People see my Detroit. I have the big Old English D, the Tigers logo on my forearm.
Yeah. And
people see that and they're like, "You're from Detroit?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "You're Jerome from Detroit." And they'll just pause. And I'm like, yeah. And it reminds me of that commercial. I don't know if you remember that commercial. I think it was a Nike commercial, or maybe it was a beer commercial. I don't know. Where the guy's name is Michael Jordan, but every time he goes somewhere, they think it's the Michael Jordan, and they're always so disappointed.
Right.
When he goes to the restaurant, he's like, "I have reservations for Michael Jordan," and they're all like, "Oh man."
Yeah, I remember that.
That's kind of what I get. People are disappointed when they see me. It's very disheartening, I have to tell you. But anyway.
That was a good rabbit trail.
Yeah, I don't know. We fucking went off on a way, way different tangent for that one.
It's all right.
I don't even know where we left off. Where did we leave off?
Oh my God.
Okay, so we left off on the fact that we never really know what Jerry Lundegaard's plan is.
Yeah.
We just know that he wants money. Oh, and then we did go into the save the cat aspect to where the father-in-law, Wade, it kind of emasculates him in his own home, right? So that's a rooting resume thing. I want to say it was, again, we keep talking about Jamie Nash and Jimmy George and their podcast. I think they came up with the term rooting resume. I want to say Jamie did. Sorry, Jimmy, if I got that wrong. Don't persecute me. But the idea is that these save the cat elements from Blake Snyder, right? They're the things that you would root for the character for, and he has one. It's where he's kind of like the underdog, right? And the old man's emasculating him, so that makes us want to root for Jerry, right? So obviously Wade is the alpha in this relationship, right? And when he's trying to convince Wade of this parking lot deal, he says this is a quote, "This could really work out for me, Gene, and Scotty." The old man sort of looks at him and says, "Gene and Scotty never have to worry."
Yeah.
What a fucking dick, dude. So the old man's basically saying, my daughter and my grandson will always be set for life.
Right.
You, on the other hand, you fuckwad, you're lucky I even allowed you to marry my daughter, right? Like, so obviously we root for Jerry on that aspect alone, which again argues the point that he's the main character, but he's not. Well, at least he doesn't become one. He is now. But anyway, all right. So that's how the Coens keep fucking juggling that act. Also, the Coens use what's known as in media res, which in Latin is into the middle of things. That's what that means in Latin. And it's a screenwriting term. It's a screenwriting technique where when you start a story, you're already in the middle of it. Like, again, when this movie opens, he's already meeting with Carl and Grimsrud, right? So he's already contacted Shep. He's already got the plan. He already has the car he's going to give them. All that already happened off screen. We didn't even see any of that happen. So we've started when this movie's already began. You could argue that Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, in and of itself, is in media res, right? Because we're starting in the middle of the Skywalker saga.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So Fargo starts in media res. The car delivery, this is where the opening is kind of shady, because the car delivery could be considered the inciting incident, or in a completely different movie, it could be the fun and game sequence of Act 2. If Fargo started with him coming up with this plan, and he's thinking about it, and he's concocting it, and he contacts Shep and everything, the second he arrives at the bar, that might be the beginning of Act 2, right? But in this movie, it starts the movie.
Right.
So for our purposes, since we're trying to use Blake Snyder's beat sheet, we're going to put it as Act 1 setup, and let's see if Jerry can push himself into Act 2 despite starting in media res. So the best place to figure this out might be, my 4-point push. All right, ready? Inciting incident, 17 minutes in, Gene is kidnapped. This is the first hint to everyone other than Jerry that something bad is happening, right? Because so let's just assume for a second you don't know Jerry Lundegaard's in on it, right? Her getting kidnapped, that's the first crashing in that something has happened to this family, right? That's the inciting incident. We don't, again, if you're a neighbor or a family member, you don't know Jerry's in on it yet.
Right.
Right? So, inciting incident. Catalyst, 24 minutes in, Jerry comes home and sees that Gene is gone. Here's why this is different from the inciting incident. It's real now. Right? Up until this moment, he didn't know if those guys would ever show up.
Right.
It could be he delivered them a brand new car in Fargo, North Dakota, and they just stole it. Right? They just took it and left and said, this guy's fucking nuts. We're not listening to this guy's plan. We're leaving. We're taking this car he brought us and we're just leaving. He doesn't know that they're ever going to show when, where, how. He doesn't know any of that. When he comes in and sees that Jean was gone and the house was tore to shit, he knows now that it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's your catalyst. Debate begins. He has time to consider his next move. He could truly chicken out. He could. He could be like, oh, fuck, I didn't mean for this to happen. I don't want anything to happen to Jean. Oh, fuck it, the deal's off. I'm going to call the cops, or I'll call Carl, or I'll call whoever and say, forget it, the deal's off. Right? He could, but he doesn't.
Right.
He then plans to make this official by calling his father-in-law, Wade, to get him involved on getting the ball rolling on the bail money, which, by the way, is a great phone sequence. I mentioned on the Silence of the Lamb episode.
Yeah, I do remember this.
Remember when Hector takes off his flesh mask, the very next scene is the payphone dropping.
Yeah. You don't even hear the conversation. You don't need to.
You don't need to hear the conversation. You just see the phone dropping and our dealer running down the hallway to tell Jodie Foster that Lecter has escaped.
Right.
Same concept here. We don't need to see the phone call. We just need to see Jerry's preparation for the phone call, where he's, oh, Wade, oh, it's so bad, oh, Jean, oh, my wife. Like, he's coming up with all kinds of things. He's preparing for the phone call. I'll tell you what, there's another one here that I forgot to make a note of. It happens in Terms of Endearment. I don't know how well you remember that movie, but you know that in that movie, at some point, Deborah Winger gets cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a scene where she's in the hospital. She was just in there for tests. And their doctor comes in, and he goes, I'm sorry, but it's a malignancy. Mm-hmm. And she says it at the same time. It's almost like a jinx moment, like they both say malignancy. And then she goes, say it again. And he goes, malignancy. The very next shot is Shirley MacLaine's character hanging the phone up. And she's freaking out, and she grabs the housekeeper, and she's like, we got a problem. Our daughter was sick, and she's got a cyst, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's that shot starts with her hanging up the phone. Yeah. We don't need to see the phone call of Deborah Winger calling her mother. Right? We know already what she's going to tell her.
Right.
So the concept for new writers out there, when you're thinking about, phone calls are boring, okay? Generally, phone calls are boring. Find an intriguing and interesting way to get that the exposition across without having to show it.
Right.
And Fargo is a perfect example where he's preparing to tell Wade what happened, but we don't ever see the phone call. In fact, the scene ends where he's all riled up, ready. He's got the story he wants to tell, and he's ready to lay it go after he dials the number, and then he goes, oh, Wade Gustafson, please. He forgot that he has to deal with the secretary first.
Yep.
So the secretary has to patch him through before he can begin his story. And that's where that scene ends.
Yep.
So, okay. That was my debate. Break into two at the 29-minute mark. Grimsrud kills 3 people in Brainerd, including a state trooper. Why is this the final push? Why is this the break into two that is needed? It's because without it, Marge never gets involved, right? If there's no murders, there's no telling if the cops would ever get involved with this case. The plan was perfect without cops, right? Without cops, it's perfect. Without killing, it's perfect. But Grimsrud kills 3 people, including a state trooper. Now it's a problem. Yep. Now we're in Act 2, right? That's the propelling moment.
Well, and you realize this woman's life is really in danger.
You mean Jean Lundegaard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the husband, at first you're like, they're probably not going to really hurt her, right?
Well, he even says this is a no rough stuff type of deal, right? This is supposed to be clean and cut. It is what it is. It should be smooth sailing. But Grimsrud's kind of a psychopath. So in any sign of danger, he not only kills the cop, but then he kills the onlookers that are driving by.
Yeah.
All right.
I love that these 2 guys, Peter, what's his name?
Peter Stormare.
Stormare and Steve Buscemi are both in Armageddon in a couple years after this film came out.
Yeah. Well, Peter Stormare was also in a Seinfeld episode.
Yeah.
He's the guy with the holes. Where you mean the holes where you plug stuff in? He doesn't know the word outlet, so he just says, "You mean the holes?" Anyway, we're getting off. I don't want to get off tangent again, but anyway, all right. So B story. Once again, when does the B story come in, Chris?
Midpoint.
No, God, you say that every time. 30 minutes in.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
You always ask me after I've had a couple beers. And
I know. I was gonna say the second episode of these we're always like way off. Okay, so the B story, 32-minute mark. So it's usually a half hour in, according to Blake Snyder. At the 32-minute mark, that's when we're introduced to Marge. In Jerry's beat sheet, Marge represents the B story because she's the person that's going to lead him to his climax. Not really a spiritual goal, but she's going to lead him to the end of his journey. That's I paused before saying spiritual goal because we know Jerry's flat arc. He's not going to learn a goddamn thing. Marge is about 7 months pregnant and gets the call that wakes her up from her sleeping with Norm, her husband, laying next to her. This is important. I want to really nail this. And to do that, I need another beer. Hang on. Yes, for those of you that listened to the Raising Arizona episode, you know I started with a very hard whiskey. I'm now taking it easy. And taking it easy to me is drinking beer. All right. Okay. If we beat sheet Marge at this point, right, as perhaps the new lead.
When you beat sheet Marge, it sounds like domestic violence.
When I Blake Snyder beat sheet Marge, is that better or worse? I don't know. It just sounds like Blake Snyder's beating Marge.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know. All right, this is her opening image, right? Here's her opening image. Norm puts his arm around her while sleeping, while she's on the phone, and he's not wearing his wedding ring. This is an interesting touch because this phone call is work. It's business. It's work related. And thus, it's non-threatening to their marriage. So the need, quote unquote, need of showing his wedding ring is not necessary. I make this point because it will come counterpoint later. In any case, this strengthens the theme of appreciating what you have. This was Jerry Lundegaard's original theme, and it's now carrying over to Marge, especially since Norm wakes up. He's willing to get up for his pregnant wife and make her breakfast. And she's like, babe, you can sleep. I got to get up. I got to go. I got to go to work. You can stay sleeping. It's early. And he's like, you got to eat a breakfast, Margie. Oh, he clears his throat. A great Norm moment. By the way, I love Norm in this movie. We're going to get to Norm later. But that's his opening. That's her opening image with him, is that he's willing to get up and make her breakfast. Appreciate what you have. Fun and games. Now we're in Jerry's Act 2 mirror flip of Act 1. And ironically, Jerry's fun and games is the 4-point push for Marge in her beat sheet. The inciting incident for her is getting the call. The catalyst is she sees the dead bodies and realizes the magnitude of what just hit this peaceful town of Brainerd. The debate is questioning her partner on his course of investigating. I don't think I agree with your police work there, Lou. Right? And the break into two is getting the lead at the Lakeside Club where the two guys checked in and left the license plate blank, where she says, oh, that's a good lead. That's her break into two. Why is all this necessary? It doesn't necessarily have to be Marge. She could easily call the FBI and say, I realize, obviously murder's a state charge, but she doesn't know where these people are from. Yeah. Right? She's like, I might need some help on this. This is a small little peaceful town, and we got 3 murders. And one of them is a state trooper. At the very least, if you don't want to call the FBI, you would call the state, right? You would call the state federal marshal. Yeah. And say, we got a problem here. We're not used to murders in this town of ours. And now I got 3, including a state trooper. She could, but she doesn't do any of that. She's going to take it upon herself. That's her debate. And her break into two is where she gets that clue about the Lakeside Club. It's her case now. This is her backyard. If she turns up no clues, she likely calls the FBI or the state, like I said. But now she's invested. She's got a clue. And now she's invested. This is her act 2. And now we're going to see where Jerry and Marge sort of catch up to each other on their beat sheets. Wade's not happy about the arrangement where Jerry's in charge. And here's where we have a little bit more sin here. We always talk about, there's sin with these characters, particularly in this film. We already know Jerry's sin. Wade's is about to come out, that he hates parting with money. He in fact, even when his own daughter is kidnapped, he wants to offer half the ransom. When they're sitting there at the coffee house, well, maybe we should offer half. What? This is your daughter.
Right.
He wants to offer half, so that's his sin. He doesn't like parting with money either. He's just as greedy as fucking Jerry. It appears that almost everyone in this story carries their own sin. Whether it's Jerry or Shep or Carl or Grimsrud or Wade, even his side piece, Stan, his accountant guy, even Marge has her sin, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get to that, I figure, after watching this movie several times, particularly for this podcast, the only innocent people in this film are Gene and Scotty. Oddly enough, the two people Wade said at the beginning were the only two that would, quote, never have to worry, and Norm. That's it. Gene, Scotty, and Norm are the only innocent people in this entire story. Everybody else has their sin, including Marge, and we're going to get to that in a moment. At the 47-minute mark, Marge hits her midpoint scene. Remember, she didn't start her beats until 32 minutes in, so naturally, her story is going to be a little bit shorter. But at the 47 minutes, she has descriptions of the perpetrators from eyewitness contacts, the two girls that were having sex with Carl and Grimsrud at the Lakeside Club. This is her false victory because she finds out that she has to go to the Twin Cities. That takes her out of her jurisdiction, and yet she doesn't involve the state, and she doesn't involve the FBI. Now, again, the FBI, that's a bit of a stretch. You're not really going to contact the FBI unless it's out of state, right? She doesn't know yet that this all started in North Dakota. As far as she knows, this is all Minnesota. But from Brainerd down to the Twin Cities, she's a Brainerd sheriff. You know what I mean? Like, at this point, at least contact the state.
Right,
right. This is out of my jurisdiction now. Nope, he doesn't care. She's going. Midpoint scene in Jerry's timeline. At the 50-minute mark, Carl now wants the full $80,000. If Jerry had plans to get his hands on the full $1 million, this shouldn't be a problem. For anyone that is listening but hasn't seen the movie, Jerry's con is, at least for the kidnappers, he said, I kidnapped my wife, or you guys kidnapped my wife. My father-in-law, who's real well off, I'm going to say the ransom is $80,000. I give you guys 40 and I keep the other 40. That's the plan. But in reality, he's telling his father-in-law that the ransom is $1 million. So he gives 40 to the criminals and he's keeping all the rest for himself. So when Carl calls and says, I want the full 80, Jerry freaks out. He's like, oh no, come on. That's not the deal here. Dude, if your plan was to get $1 million out of this, who gives a fuck? Like, who cares about another 40? Now, I get he's probably putting on a show, but still, it shouldn't be a problem. But the greed is the main aspect that's at play here. The greed is killing him.
Right.
So he protests. He argues. Also in the same scene, he gets another call from the GMAC. They want their fucking money. So he's pissed now, right? Like God, even they are onto me. And by the way, it's so funny that there's this mentality about people in Minnesota that they're nice people. They're so nice, right? They're so nice. And they are. It's not just a stereotype. I've been to Minnesota several times, mostly for football games. Viking fans, they're the nicest people. Like, I was walking down the street in a Calvin Johnson jersey when I went to a Lions Vikings game.
Right.
They were the nicest people. Oh, excuse me. Oh, pardon me. As you're walking through, like cutting through the crowd. They are. It's not just a stereotype. They are very, very nice people. The point of that is like this GMAC guy, in the nicest way possible, he tells him that he's fucked, right? If you don't give me those VIN numbers by noon tomorrow, I'm going to have to turn this over to our legal department. My patience is at an end. Like, isn't that the nicest way possible to tell somebody you're going to fucking put them up for life if they don't fucking produce these VIN vehicles, the VIN numbers on these cars? Anyway, All right, so normally the midpoint scene is a false victory where the protagonist achieves a tangible goal, and the flip side after that is, the bad guys closing in, which culminates in the all is lost. But if you were to do this false victory at the midpoint, if you were to do a false defeat instead, then the all is lost is a false victory, right? Like they're opposites, right? Usually the midpoint is a false victory and the all is lost is a false defeat.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can flip them, where the midpoint scene is the false defeat and then the all is lost is the false victory. Here they're flipped. They go in opposites. And Jerry's all is lost would be a false victory, but we'll get to that. Currently, his false defeat is at the midpoint scene where Carl is reneging on that plan. That's where he wants the full 80,000 and the GMAC calls. Like you see, like that's a bad time, right, for Jerry. So that's the midpoint scene of his story, and it's a defeat. It's a false defeat, but it's a defeat. Bad guys closing in. For Marge, this starts right after the midpoint scene. So at that 49-minute mark, she gets a late night call from Mike and Nikita. It's 11 p.m. at night. An old high school friend calls. This represents possible danger to a relationship, which is why this time, if you notice, Norm, still asleep, rolls over again and puts his arm around Marge, and this time he's wearing his wedding ring. It's a stark contrast from the earlier time that they were woken up from a phone call.
Yeah.
For Jerry, the bad guys closing in is now Wade wants to take over. At the 54-minute mark, damn it, Jerry, you're not selling me a damn car, right? If Wade takes over, there's no way Jerry gets his money, right? No way. At the 59-minute mark, the A and B stories collide as Marge and Jerry meet for the first time. She crashes into his world with a little Q&A that he's not ready for. He stumbles on his answers. He comes off as not believable. Yet Marge is none the wiser at this point. She's just simply doing her due diligence. She's asking him questions. He's giving shady answers, but she's just like, okay. 1 hour, 1 minute in, Marge has a drink with Mike and Nikita. This is the scene that everybody I've ever talked to says, yeah, it's so weird. Like, that scene has nothing to do with the movie. Like, why did they even put it in? Like, they should have cut that out, right? It's the scene that gets the most criticism. However, I believe it's the most important scene of the film. This directly relates to the theme of appreciate what you have. It's a very subtle sin for Marge, but it's there. There's no evidence that Marge even told Norm about this drink. She's all dressed up. It's at a fucking hotel. Right? There's certainly some curiosity of impropriety. Mike turns her off quick because he turns out to be a psychopath, and he kind of brushes her a little bit too much. And but she still showed up, right? She still showed up. Yeah. She went, hair done up, makeup done up, in a dress, and she never told Norm about it. That's her sin. She was thinking for a moment, I'm a 7-month pregnant woman, and and my wife went through the same thing too. What do most pregnant women tell you? It's the time they feel most unattractive, right? This is her feeling wanted by somebody else, okay? Wow. All is lost. For Jerry, remember, this is the reverse of the midpoint. So his midpoint was false defeat. This one would be a false victory. Wade takes off with the money, though Jerry follows, and when he gets there, he sees that Wade is killed at the 1 hour, 12-minute mark. This is a false victory because for him, it's like the one guy that stood in the way of him getting his money is dead. All he has to do is pop the trunk, throw him in it, right? However, it's false because he doesn't know how he's going to get the money from Carl, right? Like, he's like, well, one guy's out of the way. That's good. But how do I get the cash? I don't know how to get the cash now. For Marge, her all is lost is a false defeat. That's when she's preparing to leave the Twin Cities the next morning. She has no answers on her case. She got nowhere with her investigating. She met with Shep. She met with Jerry. Both interviews got nowhere. Her case is cold. She also talks to an old girlfriend on the phone who tells her that Mike and Nikita guy is a stalker and he's crazy. She dodged a bullet there, but that strengthened the theme. Appreciate what you have. Okay? Dark Night of the Soul. Jerry decides to go to bed and try to forget everything that happened. Meanwhile, As part of Marge's Dark Night of the Soul, a trooper questions another witness in a driveway about a possible location of the little guy, which is Carl. And by the way, that driveway scene might be Dad's favorite scene of the whole movie.
Yeah.
Dad fucking loves when the trooper goes to that guy's driveway and he doesn't have a shovel. He's sweeping the slush off his driveway with a broom. And he tells him that, and the way he describes Steve Buscemi's character, he was kind of funny looking, in kind of a general kind of way. And the way he just describes how he talked, like, I'm going crazy out there at the lake. And then he calls me a jerk. And he doesn't use the word jerk, you know what I mean? Right. The whole scene is Dad's favorite. He laughs the entire time that scene is happening. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, looks like it's going to snow again. And they both put their heads up and look at the sky. Anyway, fuck it, Dad loves it. Anyway, so, all right, break into 3. For Jerry, knowing he has no money, he retries the GMAC smudging the VIN numbers again. You see him like wearing the lead down on that pencil, and he's still trying to rub fudge numbers on the VIN number. Like he's going back to that. He's like, fuck, I don't know what's going on with the kidnapping. My father-in-law is in my trunk as we speak. A dead, rotting corpse. I don't know. I'm going to try the GMAC thing again. So he's redoing the VIN numbers.
Right.
Marge, her break into 3 is that she has an epiphany when she's driving. And she's like, I'm going to go ask Jerry one more time. And I'm going to go see Jerry Lundegaard one more time and see if I can ask him, a couple things about her case. She's taking one last ditch effort. Right now, she's leaving the Twin Cities with nothing. A cold case, no answers. She thought, well, I'll go ask Jerry. I'll go talk to Jerry one more time. All right, here we go. Ready? Jerry jumps into his 5-point finale. Number 1, gathering the team. Jerry is interrupted by Marge. She wants answers. Execution of the plan. Jerry stonewalls her and becomes noticeably uncooperative. Hightower surprise. Marge says, Mr. Lundegaard, can I speak with Mr. Gustafson? That's a big bad one, right? Because he knows that Mr. Gustafson is currently rotting in this trunk. So they dig down deep as he says, well, hell, I'll do a lot count for you then. That's his way of trying to stave her off. She's like, what, right now? He's like, what the Christ? If it's that damned important to you, he's going to go do a lot count of the cars. Execution of the new plan, he flees. He just takes off. He leaves. He knows he's fucked. He's gone. Between Jerry and Marge's finales, Carl has a finale of his own where he finds that Gene was killed. He comes home, sees that Gene's laying on the floor dead, which, by the way, to Jesse's point, when that scene came about, we laughed. Here's poor Gene, one of the innocent people of the film. She's
Jesse
laying dead on the floor.
mortified.
She's laying dead on the floor. And Carl goes, what happened to her? And Grimsrud goes, she was streaking about or whatever. Like she was making noise.
Yeah.
She started making noise, so he killed her. And we're laughing. We're all like laughing at his response. And poor Jesse is like, oh my God, these people. So then Carl tries to square up with the Grimsrud. Here, I got the full 80,000, 40 for you, 40 for me. They argue about who's going to get the car, and because of it, as he leaves, Grimsrud kills him with an axe. Which is another point where we started laughing, I might add. Marge's 5-point finale. Gathering the team. She interviews Jerry, who flees off. Stan rats out the plan to the cops. Remember when she's in the car and they're like, oh, this is Gustafson's accountant, Stan. He's finally gone to the cops. He's saying Gustafson is missing, and so is Gene. So he finally rats out the whole plan. He wasn't supposed to, but he does. Execution of the plan. Marge drives around Moose Lake with the latest info. Hightower surprise. Marge sees the Tan Sierra parked outside the lake house. Dig down deep. Instead of waiting for backup or calling more cops, Marge decides to take matters in her own hands and deal with it herself. Execution of the new plan. Marge sees the wood chipper incident and steps in. Again, another incident where we are all in the living room laughing.
I was screaming. I was laughing so hard.
And poor Jesse is watching Gare Grimsrud use a fire log, to push Carl Showalter's leg into the wood chipper with his foot hanging out, and we're all laughing, and she's poorly terrified.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Yeah. Resolution. For Jerry, he's arrested at the motel trying to flee. For Marge, she gives the impassioned speech to Grimsrud. There's more to life than a little money, you know. Don't you know that? Talk about the time of appreciate what you have. Mm-hmm. She even throws in, and this is a quote, and here you are, and it's a beautiful day. I just don't understand. Like, that's so perfect how that part ends.
Right.
By the way, this is also in the script. In the screenplay, which isn't in the film at all, but in the actual screenplay, when Jerry Lundegaard first shows up at the bar, it's a hotel bar, I think. Or he checks into a motel as Mr. Anderson. Right? And she's like, okay, Mr. Anderson. And then he goes to the bar to meet the two guys. At the end, when he's being arrested in that motel, they're like, Mr. Anderson? And he's all, who? So he checked into that motel also as Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Okay, closing image. A flip to the opening image says that, again, the snowy cold mist drives up from the cars, only this time it's driven up not from a car toting the TN Sierra. Now it's a bunch of cop cars and an ambulance. But then it immediately cuts to Marge and Norm comfortably in a warm bed. He announces that he got the 3-cent stamp. He didn't win the big one. The Hauptmans won the big one. Their what was it? Their whatever painting they made won the 29-cent. He just got the 3-cent.
Right.
But she is appreciative of him. She encourages him. Norm, that's fantastic, right? She tells him, like, people need the 3-cent stamp whenever they're stuck with the old ones, right? And then she says, and closes out the movie, talking about the theme of appreciate what you have. Heck, Norm, you know we're doing pretty good. And he says 7 more months. Or no, he goes 2 more months because she's 7 months pregnant. Yeah. He puts his hand on her belly and he goes 2 more months. 2 more months. And that's how it ends. Happy, content, appreciative. Marge has gone through her little sin and has appreciated her spiritual goal.
She learned her lesson.
So for a flat arc,
yeah,
which most cop movies are, they do throw in a little bit of learning for her, right? A frustrated, probably, and again, most pregnant women can speak to this. V went through it when she was pregnant. It's at their time where they feel the most unattractive and the most unwanted. We know that's not true. You know, we love our pregnant wives, right?
Yep.
But they feel sort of like, I don't look as good as I used to. Nobody wants me. I'm unattractive. The Coens played on that, right? They played on that for just a little bit. Like, what if an old high school friend called and wants to have a drink? You know what I mean? She gets dressed up. She gets dolled up, all that stuff. Everybody that says that scene has nothing to do with the movie, they need to watch it again.
Yeah, that was a good point. I never really gave it that much thought. But, yeah, that's totally a theme.
So we have another fun exercise here. You know me, I love my little fun exercises. So what went wrong? That's my title of this next segment. Let's pretend for a moment that we are the perpetrators, and hindsight is 20/20. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 7 things that went wrong that they didn't have to go wrong. Number 1. The fact that greed enticed Carl and Grimsrud to want a brand new car out of the deal. That's the first problem. What if they just said, all right, we'll do this deal. You pay us 40, you keep 40, and I'll just use my truck. Right? If they don't want a brand new car out of it, there's never any connection to Jerry Lundegaard. It never gets back to the fact that they were driving a stolen brand new car in a dealership with a guy where the phone call was made, right? Like, that's what she says. The perpetrators were driving a stolen car and they called somebody who works here. So that's a coincidence, right?
Right.
If they never said, give us a new car, they just said, well, all right, we'll do it for 40 grand. We'll take my truck. Nobody ever has any connection to Jerry. Number 2, why not decide ahead of time who's going to get the fucking car? Right? Like, at the end, it becomes an argument which leads Grimsrud to kill Carl with an axe and stick him in a wood chipper. Why wouldn't they decide it ahead of time and say, okay, we're getting a brand new car out of this. Which one of us is getting it? You know what I mean? And they could say right then, well, you know, if he pays us the $40,000, one of us pays the other one for half. So one of us will get 40,000 or 20,000. The other one will get, or 30,000. The other one gets, say, the car and 10,000. I'm talking 1990 money, you know.
Right.
Maybe it's 10 grand. I don't know how much a car cost back then, but whatever. You know, and if Carl can get his hands on all 80, then one of us will get 40,000, or, you know, I don't know, 70 or 60,000. The other one will get 10 or 20,000 with a car. Like, why didn't they make that? My point is, why didn't they make that arrangement ahead of time? Right. Instead of it being a moment of contention and argument that leads to one of them getting killed. 3, not sure the ins and outs of this GMAC scandal. Again, we don't really know all of it. But what if, and again, I might sound ignorant here to anyone that really knows how to scam the GMAC. What if instead of fake VINs for cars that didn't exist, why didn't he just give them real VIN numbers for cars that did exist? As executive sales manager, couldn't he have set 10 cars aside and tell his salespeople, don't sell these 10 cars. I'm putting them in the back of the lot. They're defective. Don't sell them. Why didn't he just tell the GMAC the VIN numbers of those 10 cars? Why did he have to make them up? Again, question. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, again, I might be ignorant to great schemes and scams, but I always thought, like, why, if you don't... My thing is, if you don't have to lie, why are you lying?
Right.
But anyway, okay. Number 4. Why bother clearing the cop off the road? Right? Just leave him there. Leave him. You shot the cop, take off. Or at the very least, go to his car, turn the lights off, and grab his citation book, and then take off. The fact that they spend the time trying to clear the cop off the road and then the drive-by witnesses see it, that's what starts the whole act 2, and that's what starts Marge getting involved. If the cops never get involved, like if they don't clear the cop off the road, if they shoot him and then they grab his citation book and they leave, there is no telling how long it would have taken Marge to ever solve this crime. It remains
a cold case.
It would be a cold case for... Oh, literally. Nice job there. I like that.
Fargo.
Quite literally an icy cold case. It would have stayed like that forever. They never would have found Lundegaard. They never would have, had any of these clues.
Right.
And, by the way, if you just take the citation book and drive off, you save 2 lives. You don't kill those 2 people that are driving by.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? All right, number 5. Once Carl saw that that there was $1 million in that satchel, why haggle with Grimsrud over who's going to get the car? Really? I got 80,000. Look, I got all 80,000. 40 for you, 40 for me. I'm taking the car. Grimsrud says, we split that. One of us pays the other for half. Why did Carl lose his shit? Why not just say, you know what? You're right. The car's worth 20 grand. Here's 10 grand. You get 50,000. I'll take 30,000 and the car. Knowing he's about to go pick up a satchel of $1 million in it.
Right.
Right? Like, why would you argue with him? It's a fucking $1 million out there and you're arguing over 10 grand.
Yep.
Oh, that part bothers me so much. Just let him have the fucking thing. All right, number 6. When Wade wants to offer half, if you're Jerry, why not just accept that and say, yeah, you know what? I'll get back to them and try. The fact that he stonewalls them is what makes Wade want to take over.
Yeah.
Right? And say, you're not selling me a damn car, Jerry. I want to handle this myself. It's my money. It's my $1 million. But if he was to say, well, why don't we offer half? And Jerry says, okay, I'll go back to them. I'll go back to them and see if they'll take half. He still knows he's going to get that money anyway. So why not do that? You keep yourself in charge. By stonewalling the old man, he now wants to be in charge.
You're trying to correct the mistakes, but without the mistakes, you don't have the movie.
Of course. That's why this is titled What Went Wrong. You know what's another good movie for this exercise? A Simple Plan. Remember that movie with Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton? Oh, we got to do that movie sometime.
I don't remember if I've seen that.
We got to do that movie sometime. That's the most you'll ever get to a Hitchcock film that's not directed by Alfred Hitchcock. All right. Anyway, one more point. Number 7. Why didn't Jerry *69 the phone as soon as Wade and Carl hung up? So they're both on the phone, right? He's talking to Carl. And Carl's like, all right, enough fucking around. I want you to meet me at the top of this parking garage, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Wade's listening in, right? And then Wade hangs up before the phone call's even over. And he heads out the door with the money. And Jerry's all pissed. What if Jerry just picked up the phone and hit *69? Carl couldn't have been more than 5 feet away from that phone. If the payphone starts ringing, he's likely to go back and answer it. And if it's Jerry could say, look, change your plans. We're going to do it in 2 hours, not 1 hour, 2 hours, and we're going to do it at some other location. Carl might be pissed, but he'd be like, all right, fine. Okay. Then he waits for his dad to come back. He waits for Wade to come back. Or he meets Wade there at the first location and says, hey, they were watching. They were watching this whole time. They knew it was you instead of me, and they kept Gene. They're not coming. You got to give me the money. You got to let me do it. If I don't do it, they're not going to show, right?
So you'd make a better criminal.
He could have. Am I implicating myself right now? Is that what I'm...
Yeah, you got this figured out, man.
Yeah, I mean, he could have said they were pissed. They were watching, and they saw it was you and not me. They're going to hurt Gene. Give me the fucking money so I can do this drop. Quit involving yourself where I told you not to get involved. It would also speak to, standing up to the old man, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, none of that happened. All right. So that's what went wrong. And of course, if any of those things happen, like you said, we don't have a movie. So
yeah, right.
That's of course why those things didn't happen, is to make the movie far better. All right. I got some trivia here to end out this episode. The role of Carl Showalter was written specifically for Steve Buscemi. Grimsrud, who's played by Peter Stormare, has 18 lines of dialogue. 18. Carl Showalter, who's played by Buscemi, has 150 lines of dialogue.
And they're all in the same scenes.
And they're in the same scenes, except for the part where he's with the hooker. That's the only added stuff he has. The wood chipper used in the film is now on display at the Fargo Moorhead Visitor Center.
That's amazing.
The money that Carl stashes in the snow is later found apparently in season 1 of the show Fargo, which I've never seen, but apparently there's a character named Stavros who's played by Oliver Platt who finds the money in the snow, and then he moves to Duluth and starts a new life.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that either.
My last point is, finally, the clearing the cop off the road before we're seen by an upcoming car, that's actually an homage the Coens paid to themselves. A very similar situation happens in the Coens' first movie, Blood Simple, in 1984, where a guy has to pick a shot dude off the ground in the middle of the freeway in the dead of night and drag him to his car.
Wow.
And lo and behold, here come the headlights of an oncoming car, a potential witness. The dramatic elements of, oh my God, is he going to make it in time? Oh my God, is he going to get the car? Is he going to get the body out of the way before the witnesses come? All that is the exact same. It's almost shot the exact same, the way they pick up the body and he's pulling him, like he's dragging him. Yeah. It's almost identical. When I watched Blood Simple, I was like, my God, that scene is straight from Fargo. But then I was like, wait a minute, this one came out first. So the Fargo scene is straight from this.
Wow.
I had to get my timelines set up. That's all I got. What do you got for Fargo?
I don't know.
Other than the Jesse story.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Poor Jesse.
It's great, though. It's so great because it cemented a memory in our family history from the month after we got married. So it's been a running story for years. 26 years.
From a writing standpoint, though, isn't it intriguing? Isn't it intriguing from a writing standpoint how there is no clear protagonist?
Yeah, it is wild. This is
one of those movies where it's like the lead, the lady who wins Best Actress for the lead in Fargo doesn't show up until 30 minutes into the film.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
But they make it work. Anybody else that tries that, it's a failure.
Oh yeah, there's no way.
Right? But the Coens make it work. The kind of knowing the rules, bending them but don't breaking them. Knowing the beats. They did it with Raising Arizona, and they did it with Fargo, and I think, like I said, as we just laid out, you could argue a beat sheet for both Jerry and Marge. Mm-hmm. Well, which one is the lead? You know what I mean? Like, When we did Fat Man, we couldn't tell who the lead was. We couldn't tell any of them had a beat sheet. We couldn't tell any of them's goals or anything. That's how poorly it can be done. Mm-hmm. The Coens do it to where your leads, you might not be able to figure out who the damn lead is, but they all have their own stories going on. They all have their own beat sheets, and it all works. And it makes for a great film. I mean, obviously, this film won Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah, that says a lot.
I don't know. Anything else to add for Fargo? We get the 6 degrees?
Yeah, that I was just going to say, it says a lot because they got Best Screenplay for something that really is, I don't know if it's ever been done.
I don't think you could teach Fargo in a screenwriting class. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's uniquely breaking of rules that it would be hard for a screenwriting teacher to teach Fargo.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. 6 degrees.
So I know we chose Randall Tex Cobb, right?
From
Raising Arizona.
From Raising Arizona. And then, is it Tony Denman? From Fargo. Yeah, he was Scotty. Well, I just threw it out there. I was like, we were kind of hard-pressed.
Tony Denman.
Denman. Okay, so we were hard pressed for some 6 degrees, and usually we pick the kids that have never been in anything else. So we thought Scotty and then Nathan Jr., but then Nathan Jr. hadn't been in anything, so we went with Scotty, and then we went with Randall Tex Cobb from Raising Arizona.
All right. So how'd you do?
Right, so it's actually fairly easy. So Randall Tex Cobb in Raising Arizona, he played Leonard Smalls. He was in The Golden Child, where he played a character named Till.
Oh, yeah.
Golden Child with Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy, of course, was in Beverly Hills Cop with John Ashton, who plays one of the cops. Oh, God. What are the cops' names in Beverly Hills Cop? The Rosewood? Taggart and Rosewood, right? Mm. So he played Taggart. John Ashton played Taggart. Well, John Ashton was in Little Big League with Tony Denman, who was playing Scotty.
Wow,
so that's only 3.
3, wow.
Yeah, Little Big League, Beverly Hills Cop, and Golden Child.
Yeah.
Now, again, we could have made this way harder for ourselves if we had picked Nathan Jr., but Nathan Jr. was literally in nothing else.
Right.
So, but you said he's coming up in a documentary, right?
I don't know how legit that is because it's just when you go to the kid's IMDb, it said he has one upcoming project, and I forgot what was it called.
Wasn't it like Raised Arizona or We Raised Arizona or something like that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Arizona Raised or something. It's about the kid anyway.
It's funny. His IMDb page is him in the car seat as a baby in the middle of the road.
That's his IMDb page. I am the fucking baby from Raising Arizona. That's yeah.
Arizona Raised.
Hey, man.
That's the name of it.
Oh, that's what it is.
Arizona Raised. Whatever happened to the babies cast in the Coen's comedy cult classic Raising Arizona? I don't know what this is. It's in post-production right now.
Oh, so it might be all about the 15 babies that were cast, yeah. I guess. Maybe they'll interview the one that was fired for learning how to walk.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on these before we land the plane?
No, before we lose this feed one more time, we should just say go support your local cinema. And we lose you? We lost him. That's a great way to end the show. We lost Jerome again. I'm going to take a picture of it when it drops. There it goes. Jerome has gone away. Damn it. I'm keeping this part in. So just for the listeners, his internet sucks. So this new studio, he's got to fix something. I think it's Xfinity's fault. They are not getting the speeds they need. And the last 5 minutes of the show dropped Jerome. Jerome has lost us. Hold on. I'm telling the audience what's going on because I'm keeping this part in.
No, I'm fucking here. God damn it. This is like we're at a bar and you turn to tell me something and I've gone to like go
fell on the floor.
Yeah, or pass out or flirt with somebody or go get another drink and you're like, where the fuck did he go? That's the equivalent of what's going on here.
Well, happy hour's wrapping up, so.
Technical difficulties in our new rooms.
Yeah, I was telling them your Xfinity is on the fritz. I think, they have.
This is not a very good endorsement for Xfinity.
No, Xfinity can bite my ankle.
Your ankle?
Yeah, being kind for the kids.
For the many kids that listen to our 2-hour screenwriting podcast.
Right. All right, did you hear what I said? So before we cut out again, go support your local cinema.
Yes. Wait. Before we close out, did you have anything to pitch? Are we pitching anything? Are we giving any shout-outs? You already shout out Scott Winkleman's dad.
Yeah.
I shout out Dave Asalo. Anything else?
We've shout out to my wife for sticking with us for this.
Oh God, thank you, Jesse.
Since 1996.
For not blaming us for
I
this
think
movie.
it's 28 years this year, right? Wow.
Oh my God.
Getting old.
You are old. What do you mean getting? All right, let's land the plane. All right, folks, thanks for joining in and listening to our drinking and ranting. Stay watching, stay drinking, and stay watching.
And go support your local cinema. We did it.
My God, it took 3 hours, dude. 3 hours.